Hello, friends. Welcome back to Policy for Normal People. I'm your host, Christy Amada. I'm joined by special guest Marcus Sturdivant, Senior of the ABC Squared. We meet once monthly, although we've taken a little bit of a hiatus the last couple of months with the holidays and my absence for other reasons. But we're back into it here in 2026. And this is our special episode of Policy for Normal People that I like to affectionately call the monthly market update with Marcus. Marcus, how are you?
Hey, Christy, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me back on. It's a good time. Always good to see you. How are you?
Yeah, you too. I'm doing great. Got the new year started off strong enough, but I am anxious to get an update from you on market activity, what's going on with Chairman Powell. How are things going with that? Lots of new proposals too. Everything from credit card rates to the Trump baby fund and everything in between. Affordability is a big issue right now, whether that's housing or otherwise. So thought I'd turn it over to you, let you give us some highlights of what you're seeing out there, what you've been talking about in other spaces. And then I've got a specific question I want to ask you later about the credit card rates, because that's probably the thing top of mind for me right now that I'm just curious about.
Perfect. Yeah. All right. Well, let's jump in. So, yeah, as we sit here right now, recently we just had the Dow Jones hit 50K. That was a big mark for investors to see, but it came back down. The markets have been in turmoil, really volatile start this year. As far as stocks and trading goes, the things that were leading last year, so like tech and those industries are now lagging. We have industries like industrials and materials are starting to lead. People seem to be moving towards investment styles right now where they're trying to figure out what can't be disrupted by AI. It appears that everything is in a rolling cycle with AI of what is being disrupted. We noticed a few weeks ago, we had the Claude incident. It was like 2 Fridays ago, actually, where we had the Claude incident where he came out or announcement, I should say, where they came out and announced that they had an agent that could do a lot of the legal work, paralegal type work. So we saw companies like LegalZoom, a lot of the SaaS software as a service companies go down, CRM or Salesforce, Accenture, companies like that, where they have a seat-based model. So they're paying money per seat. This just seems to be a model that is going to eliminate some of those seats. Inside that, we saw a sell-off in that. Then, like earlier this week, we saw Altruist come out with a tax planning tool called Hazel. That shook up some of the fintech sector where we saw companies like Schwab start to go down. Robinhood has been going down in correlation with cryptocurrency as we've seen the swoosh from Bitcoin. I think when we started talking or back in around October, Bitcoin was like 120,000. It's pretty much half that since then, down to near 60,000.
That's a big dive.
It's a big dot, splits in half, but Bitcoin's also something that rotates on cycles. So like every 4 years it halves. But so that was another scare to the fintech side of it. And then today we're seeing, what is it today? There's another disruptor today. It is the garbage industry, maybe? No, it's trucking. It's trucking. There's an AI disruptor coming in trucking that can help small companies use their freight services more with to compete more with large companies. That's freight and supply chain. That stuff's so important. It's also something I studied in school. So it's just right now we're seeing the AI disruptor. So inside the actual stock market, we're seeing the market rotating out of what we've seen the last few years and growing into a different kind of market with a different kind of economy. And that's not even talking about the policy and the inflation and the data that we have.
Yeah. What's going on? What are you seeing? Like companies like, the big companies like NVIDIA, Microsoft, and all of them who are, I guess, Amazon too, maybe, that are really investing heavily in data centers, which of course, is connected directly to, the demand from AI services or AI adjacent services. What are you seeing there? I've heard some things about that, there may be a bit of saturation that some of the smaller investors in AI could suffer longer term because a lot of people have jumped into this and not everyone is going to benefit. What's your thought on that, or what are you seeing?
Right. So what we're seeing right now, as I mentioned just a few minutes ago with the software, you mentioned Microsoft and NVIDIA, though. So those are perfect examples. Microsoft seeing more of a software play. I know a big thing right now we're hearing is the K-shaped economy, where it's kind of K-shaped with the AI play as well right now. So you have the software companies like Microsoft, which are going down. NVIDIA, software companies, people who are making the chips, still were continuing to go up. So that part of the tech sector was actually up a little bit this month or for the year, but where we saw the software part of it pulling it down as a whole. So it is separate and it's divided. One big thing, I know we spoke about it months ago.
Yeah,
And it was
back in
local.
October, November or something.
It
Yeah.
was local to where I live, down here in Wall Street South. That's Charlotte, Wall Street South, not my creation. They were looking at building a data center in a little local town, and the residents rejected it. Now we're starting to see that more, where people don't want data centers built near their homes. So that was
Yeah,
a
that's absolutely true. I see that in my home state of West Virginia. They're fighting it hard in the southern part of the state, and they're fighting it here in Northern Virginia too. I mean, I think sometimes the residents are losing in this part of the country, or in this part of the state rather. But yeah, there's definitely a pushback, and I don't think that we talk enough. This is my personal view on this. I don't think we talk enough about the consequences of data centers. We talk about money to be made. We talk about all the advantages, and AI is revolutionary. I mean, I use it every day in my running my business, but at the same time, I don't think we talk enough about the impact on the ground with people. So that's interesting to hear. That kind of confirms, what I've been seeing and hearing as well.
Right, and then the impact on your wallets. These data centers consume a lot of energy. We just got the inflation report earlier today, around 2.5%. But if you look at electricity inflation, it's like 6.7%. So there's so much inflation inside electricity. Then we just had these storms that came through. So the seasonality in that will increase your costs. The heating costs are going to increase, or energy costs are going to increase when we see these storms come through. Also, another reason why you see, as they construct these data centers, we're seeing investments going to companies that are used to build them, the picks and shovel type companies right now. People that are actually going to be involved in building the data centers. So you see
Mhm.
lot of that right now as a shift inside the AI by investment. So the investment's still happening. You mentioned capital expenditure earlier as well. People are worried about the level of
Yeah.
capital expenditure that we're seeing out of these companies and whether it can be sustained. That's TBD. These are some of the largest companies in the world, some of the greatest companies in the history of the world. If you look at the history of just business and technology, some of the greatest free cash flow that we've seen, but they are now tearing into some of their free cash flow. I was in a call yesterday with an advisory board, and they mentioned how I think it was Microsoft is spending, no, it's Google. They're spending like 40% of their total revenue on capital expenditure, not their free cash flow, total revenue. So that's just a huge shift in AI investment.
Yeah, and I was going to ask about that. I mean, maybe you can help me understand a little bit better because I read things that seem kind of confusing to me. I'm not an expert in this field or anything, and when you see things like these companies that have massive, that they have massive amounts of funds, and of course, that's not all liquid funds as we know, but nonetheless, I mean, they're still taking out loans to invest in the AI boom. Why would they do that? If they have, risky.
Right. Well, it depends on how you want to finance this debt, right? So Oracle, we spoke about Oracle before. That was the poster child for it.
Mhm.
Oracle. They went out and financed a lot of their build out for these data centers via debt versus pledging some of their securities or selling some of their stocks. One reason could be that you fix the rate on that debt, 5, 10%, whatever the rate may be. Whereas if you have a stock, that stock could go up 10, 20, 30%. Who knows what that stock move could do? And then on the person who's taking that stock or whatever is collateral for that debt, they know that stock could also go down. So maybe they're not as secure as taking that stock as collateral for their investment. But yeah, generally when you finance things, businesses when they build out, they do generally go out and finance debt. But the level of debt is the problem and the return on investment. See, that's the thing. People have been hearing about AI. We really start hearing about AI like 23, 24, 25. People want to see where's the return on investment now, right? Where are these dollars coming back? People have been spending hundreds of billions of dollars to grow out this AI infrastructure. So they want to see where's the return on investment, the ROI in these moves with data centers.
Yeah, sure. I mean, you can only give so much leeway to the spending side, and then you want to start seeing some return on investment, and that would include the average investor too. I mean, I'm curious, how much has this phenomenon, this AI revolution, and the investing that at the top going, how is that affecting the average person's, say, retirement investments and things like that? How should the person on Main Street think about what that may or may not do, or does it impact really, at least yet, things like retirement funds and long-term savings?
It definitely impacts retirement funds, depending on your person's age. If you have a longer investment time and you own like individual positions in some of these great companies that are going down right now, this is great opportunity to buy these companies at a great price and see the appreciation in years from now, right? But if you're a person who's about to retire next month, next 6 months, hopefully you already repositioned your portfolio where you weren't in so many individual stocks anyway. But more towards if you do have stocks, you're on the indexes are the market has been broadening out this year. So that's another thing that we've noticed with the market, right? The equal weight market. So the markets and the way the indexes work, some of them are like weight cap. So the bigger the stock, the bigger the percentage, like NVIDIA, the Mag 7, there's a build out where that's like 30% of the S&P 500. Then there's also a thing called an equal weight market cap, where they just take the stocks and divide them all up and everyone gets an equal amount in the stock to where it equals out the industry. So in those type of positions, NVIDIA and companies like that don't have as much of a move. Those companies, if you have the equal weight portfolio or a stock index like that, they perform much better this year than those indexes that were skewed heavier towards the Mag 7 layout. So ideally, if you're going closer towards retirement, you're going into a more diversified portfolio that way anyway. You're going to have something that's more broad span. So when you see the moves and you don't get the volatility up, you don't get the volatility down. You're positioning yourself. You've already accumulated your money. Now you're getting into a position where you want to get into the distribution portion. So you shouldn't, if you're looking to retire, you're about to retire soon, you shouldn't be heavily investing in these things anyway. Play it via index if you have to have stocks. But if you have time, I mean, I'm saying more than 3 to 5 years, invest. But know that these markets can go down and they will go down. We're in a midterm election year. We have a new Fed chair coming in. We have geopolitical turmoil going on. We don't know where the data is with the inflation and jobless claims right now.
Yeah. And tariffs, I mean, there's still a lot of those haven't taken their full impact, not even close yet. I think we'll see that, this year much more than last. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah. So, and yeah, then with tariffs. So, you have different reporting on tariffs. So we have one report coming out that says the American people are bearing the burden of the tariffs costs. Then we have inflation that comes out like today, and the places where you're looking, where you would expect to see the impacts of tariffs, is like these numbers are cooler, 2.4 versus 2.5. Where
That
is it
makes me
actually at?
question about gouging. I mean, that makes me question about price gouging too,
Pull
because
forward.
prices seem to go up immediately when we started talking about tariffs. But, tariffs take a while to take effect. We talked about this in earlier episodes too. So that's kind of interesting that there's two sides of that story being told right now.
That's the country we live in. There's two sides to every story, right? It's good when we have this
Yeah.
platform here where we don't get
Sometimes
into
more than two.
well, yeah,
Yeah,
3
you're right.
of the
Yeah,
truth.
that's part of that. That's actually why you and I do what we do, why we do this every month, And friends, just a reminder that the ABC Squared, Marcus, I love what he does. He tries to help Main Street meet Wall Street by providing financial literacy. And this podcast is just one example. I'm really grateful that he's willing to come on and help, my listeners and viewers with that. But I know that's a core part of your services at the ABC Squared, is it not?
Yeah, so financial literacy is a big thing for me, and just financial planning, financial advice. That's what we do at the ABC Square. So yeah, but just like kind of like what we were just speaking about, those type of things we help people out with, not just investments, but like if you have longer in the market, maybe you should be buying more right now if you can afford it. Affordability is a really big thing, a big issue in America right now. I heard a stat that your dollar from 1997 to today has lost like a third of its value. So, right. So
Mm,
people are like, I'm staying safe in the
really?
dollar, but I mean, think about it. Think about how much things cost in like 97. Think about how much um, a gallon of gas costs versus how much it costs now.
True.
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
Uh,
No, it's a
it
real
took
it's
the
a real
whole-
effect for sure, and and the dollar doesn't go as far.
it doesn't go as far. And then the dollar has been weakening historically levels, the last few years. It's kind of caught a little bit of footing here recently and moved back up, but that's also tied into geopolitical uncertainty. The dollar is no longer the largest reserve currency in the world. It's now gold.
Wow, just think about that. I mean, just chew on that for a second. I mean, that's kind of a harkening back to the past, isn't it?
Right.
When
Back then,
people had more faith in gold, and before we went off the gold standard and all of that. So yeah, that's kind of tough to get your head around.
yeah, Britain streams that the gold back in the 70s when Nixon went off of it. But yeah,
Yeah.
and it's back, and we're back there 50 years later.
Well, that's a kind of a great pivot to something that's been on my mind lately. I know there's a lot of other things that we'll probably hit on here too. There are two policy proposals that, of course, pretty prevalent in the news right now. Proponents and opponents on both sides. So first, let's talk about the Trump baby fund. Tell me what the latest is with that. Is that gaining any traction, and what does the debate look like around that? I haven't followed that real close, but I'd be interested in what you have to say.
Gotcha. Yeah. So Trump baby funds also something we were talking about a long time ago. People should go back and
Long
check
time
out.
ago. Just wondering where we are now.
I mean, 'cause that was before July 4th when we were talking about this stuff.
And I want to know how we get the funds in the fund.
Right. So that's one thing. Okay. So the funds all right, let me slow down. So the Trump baby funds, they are live. Well, you can sign up live. You go on the IRS form. It's IRS form 4547, President
45,
Trump's
47. So
number.
that's available now. Okay.
Trump's
Okay.
president number 4547. You can go on there and fill out the form. I actually went there and checked it out the other day. I need to fill it out for all my children, but I went there and looked at it. I didn't fill it out. I think I might make a YouTube video
Yeah,
doing
you and
that.
I are in different stages of that game, but I've definitely got children who are going to be having children before long, and that'll be relevant to them. So yeah.
Right. So you go on there and you fill out the form. You just basically put in your information. You put your child's information. You have to have a social security number. Obviously, they have to be American citizens. If they were born in between 25 and 28, they'll get $1,000 seed money from the Treasury, from the people. So they'll seed the money. The funds and the accounts go live July 5th. And this is what I've heard Secretary Besson say. So it's coming straight from his mouth. July 5th is when the accounts will go live. There'll be, like I said, so there'll be $1,000 seed money for people born 25 through 28. But anyone under the age of 18 can open these accounts. We spoke earlier how, in my opinion, I thought these accounts were going to be a move to induce private sector investment into children and into America. And we've seen that. We've seen more companies do it. We saw the Dalios family do it. We've seen the Dale family do it. We've seen JP Morgan do it. Bank of America is doing it. The NFL is doing it for employees of their corporations. So we've seen this expand to where more children are going to get more funds. So these are pre-tax accounts that grow into, you can take money out when you turn 18, but ideally in these accounts, you want to let them grow until like retirement accounts, right? You want to let them grow until they're like, so you're like 65 or 62.
Do they go into a trust fund automatically, or is it up to the parents to decide how
They're
they're going to
IRAs.
use it?
And when you turn 18,
Okay, so they are. Okay.
that's when the kid takes advantage of it. Yeah. And they're invested
Okay.
inside mutual funds, well, investment funds that are strictly U.S. funds. So they're going to be invested inside the U.S. In index funds inside USA. So it's also a big part of financial literacy. So kids can look and see and say, because if you own an index fund, you pretty much can walk anywhere and say, I own a little bit of that, I own a little bit of that. Some people like that. Some people like to walk in and be like, go to McDonald's and say, I own a little bit of McDonald's, things like that. Some people take it too
Yeah.
far, and they're yelling at the cashier about how they own part of this company. But, I mean, it's like, but it is a good thing. It helps kids because a child will see in their 18 years, they'll see the stock market move, they'll see it go up, they'll see it go down, they'll see how it works. So that'll be
What a great kind of tool for financial literacy, along the way, like start early, right? I mean, one of the big criticisms I have of, my generation, the Gen X generation and ones before it is really, I mean, I think schools are doing a much better job now of teaching financial literacy. I don't know how the comparison would be between private and public, but I know that my kids went to a private school in West Virginia, a small private school, and they did teach financial literacy and they did a pretty good job of it. My son actually got his degree in finance, and it seemed to me like they had a much better foundation than I had growing up. It was just not taught. Economics class did not cover it. I could see this as a, instead of having some kind of fictional scenario, you've now got a real time, real life situation that pertains to you, to your child, to be able to teach that child along the way and not wait too late for them to understand investing and make smart choices.
right. And this is, yeah, exactly. The more you know, the better. And this is also a way that other people inside your family can invest inside this account too. I mean, there already are other accounts though. So let's not make it seem like this is the only account like that. Like you have
Sure,
529s,
sure.
you have other investment accounts that you can place for children, but this is a government initiated one. You can contribute up to $5,000 a year. They have some estimates that show you, and once again, it depends on where the bureau is coming from, where you're getting these numbers, but that show that if you were to
Yeah.
max fund this thing $5,000 a year up to like 18, by the time you're like 65, you would have seven figures. So, and you would be set up. Once again, like I said, these are pre-tax accounts. So that's one of the things it doesn't click with me, because when you have the
Hmm.
pre-tax account, that's kind of just like a loan for the
Sure.
loan for the government in the future, when you
Hmm.
have to pay that tax bill. Because if you start
Yeah,
with
it comes due eventually.
if you start with $1,000 and it ends up at $1,000,000, you're paying taxes on that growth, right?
Sure. Yeah. And is anybody talking about that? I mean,
We are.
or just us, just us normal people, right? Yeah, that's a big concern. I don't know that it would, be something that be that would cause you to say, let's not do it.
Yeah.
It seems like there's a lot of advantages as we just talked about, but I think that's a consequence we would want to look at, much in the way we would look at inheritance tax or something like that. how do we address that? But yeah, that would be quite a tax bill that would come due, later on in life, and it could come due later on in life, as is often the case, at a time in your life when you're older, you maybe have more health problems, you've got other things that can eat into your savings and the benefit you would get from that retirement. So yeah, we hopefully we won't ignore that part of it and we can figure that out. So you were saying that other people can invest in it. Would that be like grandparents, parents themselves, things like that? So other family members can contribute.
Right.
Now I'm gonna be a devil's advocate here. Is this also an effort to whittle away or do away with eventually the social security net that we already have? Because I know that there are plenty of libertarians out there who would like to do that.
What kind of net are you talking about? The one with some holes in it? Yeah. So yeah, eventually,
Social
probably.
security.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, and you've heard the rumors that eventually this probably or possibly could replace Social Security. Maybe. I mean, a lot of people, but on that same note, a lot of people worry that the government is going to or will turn this into a sludge fund, as they say Social Security is now, right? They'll just take this and turn it into a sludge fund. I don't know if you'll be able to do it quite as easily with this fund, just because these will be individual accounts, which Social Security is, but the children will be watching them. It'll be minor. The people will be more interactive. And you can take the money out at 18, if you want to. You can take it out like 35, and this is without penalty. You just pay your taxes if you want to play like a down payment on your house. But if you were to take the money out before that, you would pay the taxes and the penalty on these Trump baby accounts.
So the people who turn 18 that are going to benefit from this as babies, they need to come and see you at the right time if they're going to empty that fund and make sure they're investing it in a good way if in fact they're going to cash it in at a younger age. Yeah, very very interesting stuff. I'm curious to see how it continues to play out. Another thing I'm interested in talking about this morning, we can kind of close with this, is so Jamie Dimon, CEO of JP Morgan Chase, also board chair. He was at the World Economic Forum recently talking about, and plenty of people are talking about this, the 10% cap on credit card interest rates that Trump is proposing. And of course, the executive branch cannot sign an executive order to make this happen. It's something that's got to go through Congress, as we know. But the president is pushing it heavily. I'm going to be, again, maybe devil's advocate, maybe angel's advocate, depending upon how we want to look at it. But I feel like there's a big elephant in the room in the debate between proponents of it and the opponents of it. And I'm just curious what you've been seeing, what you think about this. The elephant in the room that I'm talking about really is I feel like both sides are happy with a largely debt serviced economy, having massive amounts of debt through credit cards, among other things. When you see folks like Jamie Dimon who are sort of tongue in cheek about, well, let's test it in states like Vermont, Massachusetts, which are, of course, heavily Democratic states, and also high population of college educated folks who support the high regulation on the financial industry and banking. Others on the other side of that, of course, Jamie would be one of those bankers who do not support excessive regulation. But you see this conversation happening where the opponents say, look, it's going to severely affect 88% of the population's access to credit. And that's a bad thing because people rely on credit cards to pay bills, to buy medicine, to just survive. And then you have the other side that is saying, well, maybe, will force people to be more responsible with their finances, with their budgeting and things like that. I see some truth in both sides, but I also, again, come back to, I don't hear in any of these debates on either side of this issue a call for how this could, if done correctly, help people to regain some of their agency over their finances and budget better, but also recognizing that there are forces in play that put people in this situation, lower wages over decades that don't keep up with either inflation or, the market in general. What are your thoughts on the 10% cap?
Right. So
I unloaded a lot on you there, but
no, you're fine.
it's something I'm curious about.
Yeah, it's something, we're talking about 10% cap. We're talking about with the Charlotte Business Journals, Yahoo. It's been a big topic. So 10% credit card cap. I mean, like with most things that I see, the president, he kind of like put out the trial balloon. He'll say something and then just to see if where it gained traction. And then he kind of made a more direct statement. And when he did, you saw some people actually go into action to try to make these things happen. Like Bank of America down here started working on a card specifically to meet that criteria, right? And I'm going to get into your deeper question, but what people have to realize is that there are already cards like this. You already have cards with 0% interest, cards that you can roll over
Yeah.
and
Especially for
reduce your
transfers, you a
right.
lot of times it's temporary though, isn't it? I
Eliminate
mean,
your balance. Well, the terms are usually longer than the year cap that President Trump is proposing. He's proposing a year cap at
that's
10%.
true. It's only a year, and a year doesn't do a whole lot, in my opinion. I mean, that's especially if you're. I mean, I think the average debt, credit card debt, is somewhere around 6,500 for families. That's kind of where it's landing.
Yeah, and credit card, the rate is in the 20s to 30s, just the average rate. I think it might be like 18
Right.
to 25. But so, yeah, so with the year, what you would have to do if you were attacking this problem as a household, as Main Street, you would have to figure out a
Mhm.
way to. So, are they going to cap this 10% on your existing debt that you already owe? Right. But if you get to the 10% cap, you want to work on paying down that debt you already have. Like you mentioned, people aren't just going to change their habits. If you take it to the people in Vermont, I guess you're based on the factors you made stated that they're better set up to make financial decisions, manage their credit better. So versus someone who's not in these other states, they're going to have to change their habits to people who already don't qualify for these type of credit cards. Another thing is they'll, like you said, I don't know if it's up to 88% of people, but a lot of people will just lose access to credit via a credit card. They'll have to go to like check cash in place or something like that. And then where they'll end up with even higher rates for their credit cards. Some of the stuff that they'll be taking loans out and credit on won't even get reported back to their credit agency. So they won't even improve their credit score by paying off this debt if they're disenfranchised from the credit industry. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, you
That's
look
true because that's a good point because you build your credit by paying off debt. You don't necessarily gain a good credit score by not having debt ever at all. You kind of you find yourself. I know when I was a young person, I realized that I probably needed to get a credit card, even if I could pay. I was able to pay for my expenses. Thankfully, having a credit card, putting something on there, and then paying off the full balance is what really accelerated the credit score.
right? And now they've even like updated the models now to where it reflects more recently to how you're using your credit in real time. Like not so much as like paying off your debt obviously is good every time. If you can pay off your credit card debt, do that every month.
Yeah,
That way you don't pay any interest. But you're looking to see if
sure.
people are trending in the right way, like getting better at utilizing your credit. That can help with your credit score. Now it's a more dynamic experience, I should say, with the way the credit agencies and model systems rate your credit now as it was much more static before. Just with the speed of information is how we move now. But back to the affordability. So in general, so this is an effort, I guess, by the administration to cap affordability or to combat the affordability issues that we're seeing. So if you cap these credit cards at 10% and people are paying off all their debt, which honestly, I don't think most people would, or we wouldn't be in a situation where we're having this conversation right now. Right. We got here for
Right.
a reason.
And a lot of people can't. They just
Right.
can't. I mean,
Right.
the economy, this is the thing that I think I have a little bit of a pet peeve on. It reminds me of the whole, I see Diamond and others as kind of the descendants of the Jekyll Island crew, right? That set up this, sort of credit debt serviced economy. And it's built and built and built over time. And I feel like nothing we're talking about, I feel like the 10% credit card cap has opened the door to talking about where the gaps are, but I don't know that any of the solutions being proposed are fully addressing the real issue. Again, that kind of elephant in the room, because I mean, advocates of, well, people are going to lose access to credit, and that's the only way that they can maintain their lifestyle. And I'm taking out of that people do make bad choices on their own, right? I mean, that affects your credit too. If you're buying things that you don't need or, in excess, but plenty of people are buying things they need to have, buying things for their families, their children, and don't have a lot of choice in that. And so the debt continues to mount, even if you're paying the minimum balance. So I guess I'm just kind of glad in a way that it came up because it is making people talk about these things more. Whereas we've just sort of accepted as a society that, plenty of people are in debt, many people much more than, and if you take students, they've got student debt that's, way more than that average credit card, 6,500 or whatever it was.
Right. And then yeah. So like even at the 10% cap, like you mentioned, it's it's a Band-Aid on a broken, chopped off arm or something. Like, it's not going to be enough. You mentioned the debt and how we've become just accustomed to going deeper into debt and just operating from that. That's part of how the government operates as well, right? Ever since we last seen a balanced budget,
Sure.
quote unquote, back in the Clinton era, the government issues debt. The government operates a debt and a deficit, right? We're operating a debt and a deficit, but you can shrink that debt and that deficit with growth. I think that's what the government is trying to do. They're trying to cut the spending, cut spending, cut rates, which will accelerate growth on the top side. But so you have to catch that inflation if that's your plan. Just run a hot economy, because it can run hot and then you're stuck with historic levels of inflation again. So then
Right.
if growth is growing at a higher rate than inflation, then yeah, that gap can decrease the deficit and decrease your debt if you're paying back your debt. As they're looking to lower these interest rates, I don't know if you noticed this morning, when the inflation data came out, the 10-year treasury, I told you I'm watching the 10-year treasury. I always watch the 10-year treasury. It went down to
Yeah.
like 4%, so almost at 4%, where like
I
last
saw
week
that.
it was up to 4.3. So that went down. If the amount that we're paying to finance it and the 10-year debt isn't what their 10-year treasury is not what the government's going to be paying the debt on. It's more like the 2-year treasury. But as those levels go down, that's going to cost less money to pay off the debt in general. And this whole theory, so that's a macro theory, right? But in theory, it should trickle down to the micro, right? To our households. Like, home people should be spending less, or things should cost less for people as wages grow. And that's been a big part of the problems. You say affordability, wage growth just hasn't kept pace with inflation.
Right. And then you have the job. What's the unemployment still like? What, 4.3%, something like that?
Yeah.
The last number I saw. And going back to what we talked about in the very beginning of the episode, is there is so much fluctuation, so much uncertainty, but geopolitically and right on the ground from the effects of inflation. But also, we haven't talked a lot about, at least in this segment, but it's a big factor, is that unemployment rate and the job market. Because a lot of these companies, for instance, that are investing heavily in AI, part of the reason that they are offsetting that cost is by downsizing their workforce. I mean, we've seen massive layoffs here lately in the tech sector. So, and that's not the only sector to consider, but all of those things, that's putting people back into a situation where they may have to use more credit card debt to get by until they get that next job, or you know get on their feet again.
And then another piece we're not even talking about is immigration in this whole situation, right? So we're going to
Sure.
see net negative immigration for the first time in a long time in this country, right? Let's talk about how this literally impacts Main Street. You want to talk about how it impacts your house? If you want to buy a house, okay, let's say you're going to buy a house. A lot of these immigrant workers were builders, right? Well, the cost to replace these workers, this isn't stuff AI isn't doing now. I know I mentioned a robot that was laying bricks, but it's not replacing builders and workers right now, right? So these new workers that are coming in are going to require higher wages. There's going to be less of them. So it's a supply demand input cost right there. There's less supply of houses already. So as the cost of these workers come in, the cost of these goods go up. Main Street has to pay more just to buy their house with that inflation alone. That impacts into the inflation, right? So that's wage inflation. Same thing with farmers, right? Out in the middle of America, you have machines and things that can pick up these your crops and harvest them, but certain things humans have to do. A lot of these workers were immigrants. So now, once again, when you replace these immigrants, you're going to have to replace them at a higher wage than you were probably paying them before. So it's going to cost more to get this stuff from the farm to the table, and the American people are paying the price of it. So that's how immigration directly impacts inflation and hits Main Street, right there.
But haven't we for a long, long time, with the massive increases in immigration, both legal, illegal, because, we have workers in either of those areas. I mean, in a way, we've kind of created this situation a long time ago by replacing US born workers, or deterring their incentives to take these jobs, even if they're temporary jobs where they move on to something else. And you also have the sheer impact of population growth. Like, there are some positives to the reduction in immigration numbers, just speaking specifically about the numbers, not necessarily, not talking about people themselves or where they come from or anything like that. But, more demand comes from more people needing the same things. So immigration has been sort of a positive and a negative in that regard, has it not?
Immigration, and give that to me again in the regard of.
Yeah, so, we really opened the floodgates with immigration in terms of just the volume of people that come in annually, right? Whether that's legally or illegally, these are people looking for jobs, and that's in competition with the US born workforce. And also we're talking about immigrants that, are here on a green card permanently. So you've got a massive influx over decades of new people coming into the country. And then you have a situation where people are in the country are competing for jobs, and every sector behaves differently. But in general, when you're talking about, I mean, we bring in 1.5 million, about 1.6 million people a year legally who compete in high wage jobs, but they still get paid less than US born in STEM jobs, for instance. And then on the lower paid jobs, lower skilled farmers, meat packers, that kind of thing, dairy farmers, dairy workers. They're competing. They've pretty much replaced the U.S. born or legal permanent immigrant in those jobs where there used to be U.S. borns. A lot of people say, well, Americans won't do those jobs, but they won't do them now, but they used to when the wages were higher. So my question is, even though there may be some pain involved initially, have we really been operating in the true market anyway by bringing immigrants in to compete with US born workers, increasing the population, which also increases the demand on resources such as housing, especially? So is the drop that you mentioned now, is that necessarily a bad thing? And short term, there may be some adjustment and pain, but could it be better long term?
So purely financially speaking, from immigration, right? So
Yeah.
the people you're talking about coming in, even at lower wages, they're not the people who are being removed from the country. Those people are earning a ton lower wages than these people coming in on H-1 visas, right?
Oh,
Even if the
sure.
people
Yeah, it's a
coming in on
different
H-1
sector.
visas are earning less than their peers. So that's what I'm saying. Like that's where you see a big gap in the price inflation or wage inflation. Or the people who are doing these jobs, like purely strictly cash, the people who you're picking up at Home Depot in the morning and taking
Mhm.
them out to work day jobs, like that type of immigration is going to see the largest wage increase, right? Because you have people who you're just paying on the table, and now you have to get people and actually pay them, put them on your payroll, which is a whole nother thing that adds layers to your business and your inflation. No, immigration's fine either way. I mean, set your policy, have your people come in. America was built on immigration. The jobs, like you said, people.
Well, every country can claim that. I mean, we all migrated from Africa eventually. You got to go back far enough. To me, that's kind of a straw man argument, respectfully speaking. I mean, what country hasn't experienced immigration to increase its population? But to me, that's not an excuse to say, well, economically, we shouldn't tie immigration numbers to the effects it has on the residents of a country. I just, our immigration policy should be tied, I think, to how it affects us economically, not just in terms of what's good for business, but also what's good for workers and their wages.
Well, there's a whole psychological aspect to that as well. I mean, you have people who are legal or illegal or immigrants, whoever, that they're working, they're contributing to their community in whatever type
Right.
of way
But
they may be.
but is it good to have that when they're kind of indentured? I mean, they also don't have the protections of OSHA or the
Okay,
safety protections and things like that. And
but
I know we're getting away from finances.
yeah, no, they're fine. But yeah, so yeah, not to veer too far away, but the people that we're referring to, these people who are coming up here and taking these jobs or whatever type of. So globalization was a whole thing with all this. This was a big move of globalization. We're giving you some more information. You're giving us some more information. This stuff started way back before we're talking about now. We're trying to, I guess, fix a problem that we create ourselves, which you mentioned, right?
Yeah.
Growing up,
Yeah.
there were manufacturing jobs in the 80s, stuff like that. People work, you could work that manufacturing job 4 years, retire, take care of your family, right? That type of
Right.
stuff.
Right.
Have your pension.
That's all different.
That's not the way now. People are coming to America to take jobs for whatever the wages are, because where they're leaving from, not getting political, is, I guess, such terrible conditions. There are such terrible conditions that they would do anything to get away from these places, walk thousands of miles across the peninsula to get to a country to come in here.
Sure, you can understand the motivation. I'm just referring to what should the United States be doing in terms of its own economy and its workers to make sure that there's some equity in protecting people who are citizens and who have come legally, especially, and done it the right way. So I have a affinity for following the law,
It's a good thing.
especially if it is going to undermine the economy, and it has. I mean, we've hollowed out a lot of those lower paid jobs, and you're right. People who are coming from far worse conditions in other countries, they're going to take whatever wage here they can get. Plus, they're coming for a certain degree of safety, and that's all understandable. But at the same time, we have plenty of people here who are homeless, millions of homeless people. We have people that are struggling to find jobs, that are losing jobs, competing in various sectors. And of course, the competition is not a straight line. It's every sector behaves differently depending upon how many people are competing for those jobs and what the demand is and what the employer needs are. But getting back to what you were saying about
Hold on.
just the
One more thing on that, just like going back, you gotta realize like
sure.
America was built on capitalism, right? And like if you operate in pure capitalism, which we don't, because there are regulations, like it will
Oh yeah,
be a
it's a mixed
cutthroat
economy.
killer place. Like it will be the cheapest labor to get the highest
Sure.
return. And America
Sure.
started at that, like it literally was the cheapest labor for the highest return when America started. Not getting political. So that's hundreds and hundreds of years of how this economy has gone. We're capitalists, people complain about capitalism, but
Well, that's why
capitalism
treating illegal immigrants so badly, yeah, they get the jobs, but they don't have the protections. They don't have the thing. They are living in many respects in ways that uh, prior centuries we have treated our laborers. When there weren't any labor protections. I mean,
children
that's how
used
a
to
lot of
work.
them are functioning. Exactly. Yeah, child labor. And well, we saw that. I mean, there was a big story done in the New York Times, series of stories actually about poultry plants right here in Virginia, not far from where I live, that were hiring child labor, immigrant child laborers. And because they were here getting paid under the table, they didn't have any protections. So, yes, I care about our prices being higher, but I also care about safety for those immigrant children as much as I care about how immigrants coming, not through any fault of their own, but it's just a natural competition that's being created, and it's affecting the job market, and how really it's a sort of under capitalism. Because I mean, if those businesses could pay the wages that really they should be, and market wages as they would land relative to other companies who are hiring appropriately, then they either succeed or fail. But that is capitalism.
Yeah, I think sitting here and just talking to you in this conversation, I think we this what we're in right now has existed from the beginning of the formation of this country, right? Immigrants come in getting the raw deal as far as wages, whether they're paid or whether they're not paid,
It has,
right?
it has
And it's just
absolutely.
it's
But
something
it's
we're
not a
paying more,
reason to not address it.
right? So it's a
Try to
bigger
make it
problem that
better.
obviously we can fix, but
Yeah.
I love the conversation.
Oh yeah, me too. Well, I think it can be fixed through policies where there is, we've been talking about credit card caps. We do have limits on immigration too. It's just that when people come illegally, we don't have any way to track them. We don't know for certain how many are here. We have some idea because the technology has allowed us through drones and other ways of detection to get a sense, and we know about how many are in certain sectors of the workforce at any given time. But still, it's a sketchy kind of tracking because there is no documentation in a lot of cases. Well, we've covered a lot. Thanks so much for helping me understand better, the credit card debate. That one, like I said, has been on my mind, and it's been fascinating to just listen to different people, depending upon whether you're a banker or, you're just an employee trying to understand this, or a business owner, how everybody's looking at it. But it's pretty fascinating. Same thing with the Trump baby fund. So I know we covered a lot. Chairman Powell his tenure is up in May, correct?
Yeah, that's when the new chair should come in. But you have to remember with Chairman Powell, there's an option where he resigned. Well, his term, his chair is over, but he could still be on the board of governors. There's so much inside of that.
Oh, that's true. That's true. Yeah.
I mean,
So he's still going to be able to exact some influence.
he probably won't. Well, I can't say what anyone probably will or won't do in this world nowadays, but I don't think the precedent is that people have done that
We live in
before.
strange times.
Right. I mean, the guy that they appointed temporarily resigned from his other office in the White House in the cabinet so he could stay on. So I think he's going to stay on, and if depending on what Powell does, is going to be what he's going to move. Update on that. I think they're going to go through the confirmation process, but Tillis won't let them bring it to a vote. I think they're going to start hearing like they have to have the oral part and speaking to Warsh. That may be something I think they agreed upon that they'll start doing, but they're not going to bring it to a vote. Tom Tillis isn't going to bring it to a vote until they figure out what they're doing with Jay Powell. And they also may move that Jay Powell intervention to the Treasury, not the Treasury, to the Senate, the Bank Finance Committee to review versus the DOJ. So we'll see if Walsh is even confirmed come May.
Now that's interesting because I mean, weren't they investigating him at some point, or Trump wanted to investigate Powell for something?
The DOJ is investigating him right now for the testimony he made to the Finance Committee and just in his handling of the reconstruction or the rebuilding of the building, the Federal Reserve building over there. And Tom Tillis down here in North Carolina said he won't vote to move any nominee forward. And Kevin Walsh is interested. I think his nomination might have been brought about by Chuck Schumer.
Okay.
Originally when he was on the board of governors. So it just tells you, and he was like a unanimous selection. So it just tells you like where the world has come, how we are now. Which is another reason why I say it's going to be hard for us to solve immigration and all these other problems, because we kept people.
It's a big issue. It's complex.
In some way, it works as bipartisan.
I agree. With that, we agree on for sure. Yeah.
It has to be partisan.
And we've got to get back to a place, both in our conversations, our discourse and rhetoric, and where we are trying to come to some kind of consensus and compromise. I feel like, it's been too long now where we're in our silos and we're dug in, and that's hurting the country. So I couldn't agree with you more, Marcus, that it's fine for us to disagree, agree, whatever on the issues, the minute details. But at the end of the day, everybody has to give a little of something they want in order for everyone to benefit. And that's what we have to get back to. The common good is always what I'm interested in, even if I have to sacrifice a little bit of something for that to happen for somebody else. And I know you feel the same.
It's compromise. Yeah, but there are a lot of people who don't feel that way at all, though. There's some people who just feel like, and but that's what makes America good. Like that we have different type of people who feel different type of ways. And it was at its best when we could have the conversations.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's good that you and I can do what we're doing right now without fear of reprise.
Right. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. At the end of the day, those are extremely important rights and protections that we have. Great way to end the conversation. Marcus, it's always educational listening to you, and I always learn a lot. I hope our listeners and viewers enjoyed the conversation as well. Folks, we'll see you back again probably here in March. We do this monthly. So Marcus, thanks again for your commitment to the show. I love having you on, and be sure to look for Marcus on LinkedIn. He's very active on there, and his YouTube channel. So, all right, Marcus, we'll wrap it up. Have a good weekend. Take your wife out for Valentine's Day.
Well, yeah, I guess I should do that. Thanks, Chrissy. Thanks for reminding me. Yeah, I probably should do something for Valentine's Day. I love you, Brittany. There you go.
All right. Have a good one. We'll see you all later.